So now we're going to take a quick 30-minute discussion with our two chairmen. We have, as you know, we have SVG US, which is the primary force behind this event. And then there's SVG Europe, which is led by Alessandro Reitano and Fergal Ringrose, my cohort over in Europe. So we're here to kind of share. We were supposed to do this at IBC, but Mike, you were too busy doing some sort of Thursday night football show, right?
I was there in spirit.
You were there in spirit,
yeah.
That's true. We did a little video. So we're going to kind of, I guess, do what we wanted to do back in September. So, Mike, how's this Thursday night football thing coming along?
Well, mercifully, it's over. It's done. And we got a triple header going on next week for the NFL Network, and then that's it. And then all we got to do is Super Bowl. So pretty much smooth sailing from here on in.
There you go. There you go. So for those of us in the room who are not familiar with SVG Europe, I wanted to have Fergal and Alessandro kind of start. Give a little bit of an update on what's going on in the European scene. So, Fergal, do you want to kind of give a quick overview?
Sure. I'll chat to Alessandro in just a moment, but probably most of you here don't really know too much about SVG Europe. We're not quite as big as SVG in the US, let's say that for a start.
Getting there.
Not yet.
We're getting there. Our biggest event is in Amsterdam in September. We had nearly 500 people there this year. To just give you a little bit of flavor, well, I suppose the key thing to say about Europe, and it strikes me listening to the remote production session earlier here, is here you've got one market, essentially one language, and a very, very large market. In Europe, as you know, we have 27 countries in the EU, soon to be 26, as you also know.
It could be 27 again, though, if Scotland comes back, right?
It is 27, yeah.
The European Broadcasting Union has 44 countries, so that's 44 different markets, different languages, different cultures, different sports in large degree. So SVG is perhaps different challenges in Europe as well. But we're delighted that earlier this year, Alessandro has joined us as chair from Sky Deutschland. And just to give you a little bit of flavor, so what's coming up, what we are doing at SVG Europe, and our first event is January 30th at BT Sport and Timeline TV in London. That's the SVG Europe Women Initiative. We've typically now getting well over 100 people for SVG Women events. I see Anna from Telstra there. She's involved with the Heather McLean, one of our editors, Anna is in her In the Loop group. And Heather's doing a fantastic job. So that's our first event, January in BT Sport in London. In February, we go to Lausanne in Switzerland. For our first Federation Summit. As you know, most of the international federations are based in Geneva or Lausanne. Ken is going there for us to do our very first panel with the federations in Switzerland with Major Events International, whom we're partnering with, and that's very exciting for us to finally start getting involved with the federations. March 12th, we're off to Bergen in Norway for our Nordic Summit with our friends from the Nordic region. That's in cooperation with Media City Bergen and the media cluster there, the tech cluster with NCE Media in Bergen. Later that month, we're in Berlin at the Olympic Stadium for our football summit. Last year, we had 350 people there. We'd hope Alessandro to have similar, and Alessandro as with Sky Deutschland will be our host. He doesn't know this yet, but he'll be our host hopefully for football summit late March 31st in Berlin. Next year, we go to Lord's Cricket Ground in May for our first OTT summit. We had previously themed it similar, what OTT means broadcast, but we're decided to largely at Alessandro's advisement. So that'll be our first OTT summit, also our first awards. That's in May in Lord's in London. June, we're with Alessandro at Sky Germany in Munich.
How are you going to have time to do any work, man? Holy crap.
Yeah, well,
They put me in this, under this pressure now, huh?
I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a flavor of what we do. So July, we're in Milan with Sky Italia. We're also at Sky UK for our women's event in the summer. September is IBC, which is our biggest event, 500 people this year, and also a reception at IBC at the Rye, which we had 300 people. October, we're in London for our Next Generation Audio Summit. And November, we're back at Future Sport, which next year will be Tottenham Hotspur, the new stadium in Tottenham Hotspur.
And then in 2021,
that's what we're doing.
We go to the moon.
And in 2022.
So, not to labor the point, but just to give you a little bit of a flavor of what we're doing. And
wait, hold on.
Alessandro this is a little bit of a reprisal of the session we did at IBC this year, and I asked you then just to give us a little bit of flavour of Sky Deutschland and also working with Sky Italia and Sky UK, particularly in light of the Comcast acquisition last year.
Okay, thank you very much, Fergal. Great to be here. I mean, first, you were very brave at choosing Continental Europe guy, to be honest. It was a wise choice, by the way. I'm with Sky since 10 years now. Since 2015, I'm overseeing the whole sports operation department at Sky Germany. That means we're a kind of an entire end-to-end service provider which oversees OB, broadcasting centers for Sky Sports and Sky Sport News, graphics, MAM, PAM services, and also program services. We're producing roughly 10,000 hours of live sports, mainly Tier 1 soccer events, but also Formula 1, handball, and tennis behind the paywall, and the same amount of hours roughly for our free-to-air channel, Sky Sport News. So it never get bored at Sky Germany, and we meet with our Sky affiliates quarterly with Sky UK and Sky Italia, and catching up on a couple of topics, what we're discussing, what we have on our roadmap, and try to align as much as possible. As you're familiar, I mean, we have national rights. German Bundesliga is a local right for Germany versus the Premier League for the Sky UK boys. So that means at the end of the day, we run independently our services, which is very important, but we try as much as we can align on technology. And with the Comcast acquisition, I mean, in my case, with Sky Germany, it's now the third acquisition we did, so I'm used to, let's say, I embrace changes. We have NBC colleagues now on board. 5 years ago, Mike, we were colleagues, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually known each other for a long time.
Ages,
and it was cool when they were, when they were part of 21st Century Fox and everything. We used to exchange notes all the time. I mean, we still do. Like, for instance, I was just telling them how great 3D is, and how they should jump back on that. Yes. So we're still trying to help each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same is now with NBC Sports. So we help each other out, and this is very important to see. There are differences in the operations. We are roughly more pushed to automate things in Europe, very, very, very seriously. We have a budget pressure which is tremendous. It's a little bit different than the US. You have budget pressure here, that's fine. But if I hear now the former Remy discussion, it is standard in Europe. It's very simple. It's standard because we have to hit the target, the budget, and there's no much options. So that means at the end of the day, we are pushing automation like hell, and this is something we can obviously learn from each other. Also with the NBC colleagues, because we have different operation models, and this is something we can discuss, and hopefully this is some very fruitful discussion within the SVG activities now between US and Europe as well.
Well, what I find, it's cool that we came up after that, the security discussion, because I think that's one of those interesting things that kind of comes out of the SVG end user community. And I know that we were talking over dinner last night with Alessandro. I mean, we don't really have the European side of the fence on board with that initiative yet, but that's the perfect one that, for NEP, that's a global thing. For you guys going overseas, it's a global concern. And I think what's great is getting the influence from the European side, where sustainability is a big driver over there. I always kind of chuckle when Formula One talks about sustainability, considering what their business is all about and how they get, how they do the flying the jets. But it's interesting to see the influence that you guys, I think, will have on our community over here as far as those efforts, conversations around sustainability. So, I mean, Fergal, you want to talk a little bit about what's going on there on that side?
Yeah. Did you want to come in first, Alessandro?
No, sustainability, for instance, is a driver for Remy. The end of the day, it's not only to say, okay, we hit the budget, it's also to convince the story or tell the story that sustainability in Europe is something which can force remote operations very much, and which can, and we do not have a committee in Europe regarding the sustainability, but for instance, we have at Sky, we have this bigger, let's say, picture initiative, which means we can ban plastic from the Obi-Wan productions, and we have a couple of good, we did the good achievements with the federations to ban plastic on the venues. So this is something we are driving. This is in our kind of a DNA, and we will tell the story to our people, and I see this is a very important part.
Yeah, I was kind of interested to hear about that in the trends conversation, saying that we've kind of pressed pause on Remy, and I totally agree that this is, I mean, it's part of the whole story on sustainability, but maybe we have a little bit, but we as a culture at Fox Sports, we've always looked across overseas to kind of see what is going on and try to learn from each other. And in that way, we had a really good relationship with Sky and still continue to do so with, Fox Sports Australia. But I was interested to hear that just because I think that the Remy model is a little bit more nuanced in the States. For instance, it's not an all or nothing thing, right? Like, it doesn't mean that, okay, you say Remy, home run production, everything. So okay, the whole control room is back somewhere else. And I think that one of the things that I've seen is really more of a production anywhere model, where you don't have to bite off the whole thing in order to gain some very real savings, some very real efficiency, some very real sustainability. For instance, ESPN right now does does EVSs back at home. We do as well. A lot of our pre and post game shows are done with a director on site, yet graphics and tape replay back at Pico. So these are sort of the nuanced things that I think that sharing these case studies, and this is something that we wanted to do here at the summit, was something that we could share. I mean, there's not exactly a competitive advantage to these things. I mean, I think that this is something that can be discussed in this SVG community, and it's great to be working with Alessandro again on this side of the business to share those stories as well.
And just to add, Ken, yes, in Europe we have introduced a Sustainability One Planet initiative at SVG Europe this year. Will Strauss, my colleague, is heading that initiative. We did our first workshop at Lord's Cricket Ground in May with about 50 OBs and sports broadcasters and producers. And Will did the first session we've done on sustainability at that event with Russell Seymour, who's sustainability manager at Lord's Cricket Ground. And also he is head of the British Association for Sustainability in Sport. Will has also recently signed SVG Europe for the Digital Production Partnership, the DPP initiative in sustainability. In fact, our lead story tomorrow in the newsletter is about that. This is a committed to sustainability program providing a self-assessment checklist to enable companies to record their progress in implementing sustainability policies. The founding members of the DPP are the British broadcasters BBC, Channel 4 and ITV. And Will has formed a group for sustainability as well. So we'll see a lot more from SVG Europe in 2020.
So I guess, we have a lot of, I think we had 48 panels, including tomorrow. So today we probably already did like 35 to 40 panels, discussions on various topics, everything. So in terms of, you were bouncing around a little bit today. HDR is top of mind for you. But what do you both see as some of the trends that you're looking to learn more about, and where do you see the SVG community, being the manufacturers and the other obviously members, kind of filling in to share some learnings?
Yeah, I always, let's say, coming over to New York because I want to learn what the US business is doing. It's a little bit the proactive part now where we don't come to discussion with our NBC colleagues. But nevertheless, what I always, let's say, interesting, or what I see as a trend, and especially if it comes to efficiency, is what can we do more with data? So all the automation, the cognitive services, what we can create more for less. This is always a phrase, but let's say how we can well, because we are a multi-platform delivery service now, and we have to change and to transform our business, and the view habits will change. So what we have to learn to transform our business, and I'm not, let's say, obviously I'm responsible for OB as well, but it's nevertheless what is the latest camera, because this will attract people, but not it will come along with more subscription, maybe not in Europe, but different content, user-specific content, and this is in a way with the same amount of people. This is interesting what we want to see. That's why we, let's say, want to talk this a little bit more into and hopefully bring us also into the SVG discussion. Having some people, what I'm keen to see is really to see more people from the third or second row on panels. People who are working in the machine room and discussing some use cases and saying, okay, I discovered this, I discovered that. And this is something we have not this time at the moment in Europe to have to do all the workout sessions, the breakout sessions. This is something maybe we can introduce a little bit more and better. But this is something where we can learn from each other, because this is where Yvonne in this event is a good example how we can do this also in Europe, and bring, let's say, a little bit more young, fresh blood onto the panels, driving diversity, hopefully more, bringing definitely more women on the panel, and discuss a product from an end-to-end perspective. That means at the end of the day, 360. No, this is not only the technology, it's at the end of the day product what we want to sell, and this could be a good discussion.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, one of the things we try to focus on for this summit was to actually get case studies, to get people to kind of talk about not only their achievements and their successes, but also their challenges. Because at the end of the day, that's what SVG is all about. It's about this community. You come here not only to see the panels and hopefully visit some of our exhibitors, but also to be together with your community. And this community is a unique one. I think everybody here has a certain degree of fame, right? Like everybody sort of knows everybody. I don't know if it's the way it is in insurance. I have no idea. But it seems like you know, you've got a certain degree of fame or infamy, as the case may be, right, Paul Boner? But I think that Alessandro's right. Like we wanted to try to get some of the younger people in here too. I remember when I first started coming to these things, you know, back in the days when Jerry Gebner would do his thing, and it was a fantastic way for me to open my network and get to know really what needed to be done, who was out there, who knows, maybe even find a job. But the community itself and trying to address some of these problems, and we hit a couple of them today, right? We hit HDR, right? HDR is a pain in the ass. I think that's what we all figured out, so well done. IP, I think we figured out that I guess it's more expensive and nobody really knows why we're doing it, so that's good. So, you know, we've worked out a lot of things here in the summit, and I was happy to be a part of that. Yeah, we learned the world is out to get us with cybersecurity and don't open any emails anymore. So, you know, that's kind of what I got out of all this. I don't know about you guys.
That sounds about right, yeah, exactly. I'm curious to see how the Olympics is going to go off, considering they're doing HDR, UHG, and IP all at the same time. So.
Yeah, and they're throwing in 8K as well. Sure, why not, right? I mean, you know, this is you know, what's great about the Olympics and the Super Bowl and some of these big events, UEFA, you know, sorry. That
2021 on
is that it's like a snapshot. We get this opportunity every year and sometimes every 4 years to, you know, put in front of everybody like the latest and greatest technology. Not only like the whiz-bang stuff, but also, you know, hey, this is you know, an IP-based Super Bowl, or this is an IP-based Rugby World Cup, or and it's always great. That's what I think kind of keeps the SVG moving, keeps the SVG relevant, because this business does not stay the same, right? I mean, in 2 years, you know, I mean, even 2 years ago, would you say that, you know, we almost every truck that's being produced would be an IP truck? Would you say 2 years ago that we would be so soon into the realm of ultra high definition? Would you say 2 years ago that virtual reality is just not a thing at all anymore? You know, it's a constantly moving business, and I think that, you know, the way that we learn from each other, and hopefully the way that we teach our younger members, is going to be the way forward, and it's also something that we collectively can do to ensure the longevity of this business. Was that like the question?
That was good.
But I like 3D. I prefer to go back to that. Yeah, but,
there you go. I'm telling you, man, it's a big thing.
I'm just reflecting. We did listening earlier today with the remote production guys. We at our Future Sport event at Chelsea Football Club 3 weeks ago. We did have NEP and DAZN, the streamer, talking about both remote production and virtualization, and DAZN using NEP and using MediaBank in Hilversum and Oslo, using some of the intelligent OB units that were introduced at IBC, MCR, remote commentary. Some of the things NEP has done for the Olympics in the past, DAZN is now leveraging that so that they don't have to be everywhere. They can't be everywhere. So that's a partnership that we discussed 3 weeks ago. We also discussed volumetric capture in tandem with motion capture for Sky in the UK, to do, I think, what they call Sky Scope, which is to capture golfers in 360 with 120 cameras and produce that, and produce Rory McIlroy and Henrik Stenson live, as it were, as VR, AR, not virtual reality immersive experiences, but VR, AR to enhance the viewing experience. One other thing, Alessandro, that we touched on when we talked a few weeks ago was the need to change the old world to the new world, and you talked about trying to change your own producers from legacy broadcast producers to 360 content shapers. So that's a huge step for your staff, right?
Yes. I mean, and at the end of the day, it comes along always with change management, and at the end of the day, we run our news channel in a very crazy efficient way. We have 3 people sitting in a control room, and they're producing 19 hours of live Sky Sport News every day. So we're now doing our refresh of the equipment, obviously, and now we're thinking about these editorial-centric workflows. That means at the end of the day, that's why the quote content shapers comes along and saying, okay, A, the editorial guys have to push buttons. It's very simple. B, they have to take care about the 360 environment. It's not only linear, it's social, it's everything, it's digital. So why we have to give them a tool where they produce on one desktop and one overlay, instead of always, let's say, jumping between the programs and doing crazy stuff and need cutters and editors and whatever they need on top of it. So, but this comes with the change management, and this is part what I want to also hopefully can more address, that we have as SVG a kind of sessions over how embrace change, how we can introduce change management, because it will come along in the near future, and it will hit Europe first, that's for sure. We have different labor law situations, we have no unions. This is something we can do, and we will do, because the budget situation will forces us to do. That's why we have this crazy Scandinavians, they're always working with only one guy is controlling everything. Then we have this German thing, and then UK. So in between, we have to start the discussion how we transform people with the tools and give them a clear storytelling, what's needed in the future, how we contribute and distribute content and produce it in a very smart way. And this comes with a lot of change, which is not done yet, but this is on our agenda.
And I think it's what's capital is and we actually learned a lot from Alessandro's first incarnation out of Sky Deutschland. We took a lot of their notes and incorporated into our automation in Pico. But you know, the first thing is, like, with all these ideas, right? You have to think about, like, okay, why are we doing this? What are our goals at the end of the day? You say, okay, you can get spun up with all this stuff and say, look, we're going to automate everything. We're going to automate cameras. We're going to automate tracking, do all this. All right, well, why, right? Is it to save money? It's okay, well, that's good. You know what you want to do. So is that really the best way to do what you're trying to achieve? Say, well, what else do you want to do? I want to maintain quality. I want to make sure the quality is maintained. You say, okay, well, one might be a little bit different than the other, but I think keeping the scope, and this is, again, I just come back to the SVG of seeing not only what people are doing, but why they're doing it, right? Like, why are truck companies building IP trucks? Why? Because they're scalable, they're flexible. Hopefully they'll last 20 years. I mean, that's why they're doing it. A company like mine is telling Game Creek and NEP, well, we're doing 4K, I don't really want to pay for it, right? Or I don't really want to do 4K now, but maybe I do. And it allows some flexibility. So understanding the why behind the how is something that I've always been interested in here at SVG to kind of get a lens into, you know, why vendors, why Telstra is doing something, why NEP is doing something, why Viz is doing something, you know, why Sony's doing something, because there's all reasons for it, and I think that it's a bi-directional communication. Right, a bunch of people up here sat up here and talked about, well, we just want to listen to your customers, want to hear what the customers want to do. Well, that sounds pretty simple, right? You know, but unfortunately, a lot of the customers have to be saying the same things in order for it to make sense. Like, I mean, I could say I want, you know, a bibulator, and he says he wants an oculator, and you know, at some point they've got to figure out which one to buy. So hopefully the vendors see some value in this as well, and understanding why all this stuff has to happen as well.
So let me ask you a why question, because, you know, in the U.S. here, we have this UHD, HDR thing. So 1080p here in the U.S. is kind of it, right? People love 1080p. No real, at this point, desire to necessarily do 4K acquisition. But in Europe, I mean, I guess, well, there are some laws there that kind of make it, there's some regulations. You can't call it UHD unless it is really UHD.
Really? Is that a law? What do you got?
Not
You
a
got
law,
thrown in
sort
jail?
of,
Like they...
there's no
It's
law.
the law.
No, it was the Sky Group law saying...
I was wondering where Hamish was. I think,
oh, yeah,
I think Hamish has been thrown in jail then.
No, but like, you know, why would a U.S. want to do a real true 4K production?
I have no idea, to be honest. I mean, I think it's just marketing and bragging rights, right? Like, we did a study. We actually find out that doing sports, especially sports with a lot of panning and lateral movement, ends up being better in 1080p than 4K. Why? Because you get more motion blur. You know, when you're looking at pixels traveling across the screen, when you're moving from left to right, you're actually traversing more pixels than you would in 1080p. And let's be honest, who the fuck can tell the difference? Come on. I mean, I mean. But HDR, I'll carry some water for HDR, right? Because HDR, I can tell the difference. I can look at it. I can see that the speculars, you know, the fact is when you have a dark foreground and a light background, the fact that you can see you can see the digital screens now and they're not all blown out. Like, I mean, those are legitimate improvements. Now, are they as big as SD to HD? No, they're not, right? The screen's still the same size and, you know, everything else. But, you know, for 1080p, I think for sports, it's right. It's right. It checks the boxes. It is a vastly improved experience. I mean, maybe, and I'm just talking for sports, all right? You talk about movies and episodics and something like that. I'll jump off that train because maybe it's better in 4K. It probably is. But certainly video games, you know, 4K all the way. That's fantastic. But for sports and what we do and the cost that it would take to really do. I love seeing this end-to-end 4K broadcast. BS. Like there's a bunch, like all the replay is all done in 1080p. Okay, so you're always going to have this mixture of 4K and 1080. So at some point, why don't you just standardize on what you know? And that's I think where it's coming from. And you know, we don't have any laws to the subject. That probably helps too.
No, you don't have laws, but we have. Let's say that I can tell you why in Europe. At the end of the day, it was a marketing. It is marketing still because we have a good HD level, and you have to tell a different story. That means that you have the more pixel, the better pixel. That comes the Ultra HD thing comes along, and to be quite frankly, I mean, I would rather go that way, to be honest, and not pushing our whole industry into a nightmare of investments. But it is like it is. We have this rule. It's not a law. This rule to say, okay, 70% main camera is native Ultra HD. So that's that thing, and that's we can measure on log files out of the Vision Mixer. That's why. So the OBVans invested into Ultra HD native UHD cameras, and so we said, okay, let's bring this 70% up to a native Ultra HD and run replays on 1080p. And this is our statement, mission statement. It comes from a marketing perspective from my point of view. And to be quite also honest, if we have a marketing guy sitting in our room and saying, okay, this is your product, Ultra HD native, and this is HD HDR, guess what? Which product would he choose?
Yeah, always.
Always HD HDR.
No, you're right.
And that's the point. It's always a tough balance between, okay, convincing a product people and saying, okay, this would be the right way. This is the cost impact on the left-hand side. This is your cost impact on the right-hand side. You can choose. They would rather, but they stick with the Ultra HD thing.
And the UHD thing is convenient, right? Because it kind of it's an improvement. But yes, is there explanation? There's more explanation in doing what I'm doing in terms of doing 1080p, calling it Ultra HD, maybe some people calling it 4K than what Alessandro's doing. He's not cheating. He's not everything. And I can prove that for sports is 1080p is actually a superior format, but it's a tough sell. It is a tough sell. Like, you're right. Like, Joe Blow is going to want 4K. Oh, well, that camera's not 4K. You're up converting it. Oh, you're cheating. And I unfortunately that's kind of, and then anybody who can explain HDR in one sentence, that's another thing, right? Because it's not like, back in the day when we went SD to HD. I mean, look, even my dad could tell, like, oh, TV's bigger. Look at that. Of course, it was stretched and it looked like crap, but nevertheless, it filled the screen. So I think communicating that, we have a duty to educate our viewers as well, to make them understand what we're doing. I never want to pull the wool over my viewers, the fans' eyes. I mean, I'll tell them straight up what we're doing, and I'll even explain to them why I think it's better. But, that doesn't mean that it's going to be a compelling case. At some point, you're right, they're going to walk away, and they're going to say, well, that wasn't 4K. He's just up-converting everything. Even though what we're doing from a pixel standpoint is nearly twice as much as HD. Right? Like, I mean, 1080i is only, what, 540 lines. It just happens to be interspersed, interleaved. So, I mean, we're doing a lot of that stuff. But I think that education is something we can also play a part in.
Yep.
So as far as, tomorrow I'm going to have a keynote with Peter Hutton from Facebook, right? So he's one of the FANGs. Although it's interesting because they're all very different. I don't know why they get lumped together, but Facebook is very different from Amazon, which is very different from Netflix and Google. But I guess they collectively represent a threat, a partner, a little bit of both. But what is your take on the FANGs? Are they part of the 360 offering? And they are bidding for some rights, the Amazon especially. Mm-hmm. What's your sense on the FANGs and where they fit into the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're interweaved within the community now. I mean, they're not going away. How they wind up being. I mean, you've seen what Fox and Paul Cheeseborough is doing with our new facility. We're all AWS. So is it a matter of keeping just one side separate than the other? I'm not really sure. For us, I mean, right now it's a partnership. I can tell you right now, Snapshot. It's a partnership. Work with all those guys, with the exception of Netflix, on doing one thing or other, and they have been great partners. They all have been fantastic partners. What they turn into 5 years from now, I mean, did you ever think you'd see, Zuckerberg testifying to Congress 10 years ago? No. I mean, these things change over time. So I think that, yes, you need to make strategic decisions in terms of who you play around with. But I would bet, and it would be interesting to hear the guy from Facebook talk about Peter talk about where he sees it. What are you guys going to do?
Well, really, tomorrow we're going to discuss really sort of how your organizations can really get the most out of that. Because it is a different experience for consumers. You're reaching them in a different way.
But I'll bet you, I mean, because this is always sort of the veiled thing, right? It's like, oh, well, is Amazon going to come in, buy up all the sports rights, and then, you guys are going to be out. So, okay. I doubt they even know, really. But right now, they're fantastic partners. They're great partners. We're going to be building an awful lot on their stack, on their, and we're going to be learning from each other. Are we teaching, a company that may one day, be a competitor? I mean, come on, guys. I mean, everybody here is either, you can't say the guy next to you isn't going to be a competitor in 5 years. It's true. So, I don't think it's any different with any of these things.
I'm not sure Amazon are such a fantastic partner for Alessandro in Germany, right?
No, unfortunately not. Yeah.
You want to explain, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we lost Champions League from 2021 on, and it goes there, and UEFA was selling all the rights now to the Zone and Amazon. That means there is no linear anyway Champions League from 21 on in 2021 on in Germany. So that means they hit the market very hard, very simple, with a price point which we as a legacy broadcaster can't compete at the moment. So we have to have some answers, which means we launch parallel Spotlight ticket program, OTT, with a price segment about €9.99, $11 something. But this will be hard. Obviously, this is a very strong competition. I'm not sure yet how they want to do this, but we will see.
DAZN is in on this too. I mean, in terms of buying sports rights and potentially putting it on OTT. Obviously, Premier League, also Amazon. YouTube with some of the MLS. So I mean, it's definitely out there but it seems like they're sort of pick and choosing their markets to figure out what actually suits. And right now, sadly, they've picked yours.
No problem. We can deal with it. And they pick ours very soon.
But it's going to force Sky to evolve, is it not? I mean, this is just part of the deal. Luckily, it's not a very long rights period.
Luckily, and we are, let's say, working, and this is part of maybe also a strategy that we are working as a kind of a content aggregator on our platform, and this is no matter who's the right has, put the application on your receiver, and you're dealing still with Champions League. But there's a sensitive pricing point out there, which reaching out in Germany, it calls very simple. The Germans have a very, let's say, high, ARPU, but they nevertheless want to pay more than €20.
Right.
And this is a very sensitive price point. Yeah. While OTT
so €20 is the magic number.
Is the magic number. So that's why
which
OTT
is funny,
service hitting in.
I mean, Australia is doing the same thing, right? They've got Kayo, which is the same thing. Is that it's essentially you could be cannibalizing some of your customers that are on traditional linear TV. Yet, like Sky, they decided to put this standalone application out. They felt they had to. So that is definitely one of the effects of what's happening.
Sure. All right, so we're going to wrap up because we want to go out and see some exhibits and have some drinks. But tomorrow we're going to convene here. So tomorrow, as Mike mentioned, we got some more case studies. So we're going to start at 8:30. I know it's early, but we're going to talk gambling, which is one of the hot things here in the U.S. From 8:30 to 9:15. Then there's the keynote with Peter Hutton from 9:15 to 9:45. Then we have a break. Then we're going to do some esports. And Joe Markowski from DAZN is going to do a keynote. Then in the afternoon, you're going to talk Super Bowl for about 20 minutes. We're going to talk 5G and the NBA for about 20 minutes. We're going to talk the launch of the ACC network, which ESPN did, for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to have CBS is going to talk about the every shot, every hole at the Masters. And then we have Sky coming back to talk about their volumetric capture, which would be great. And then we close out with Josh Steinheier, who's going to talk about the future of the manufacturing side as far as this move towards virtualization and how this may actually all happen with everyone hopefully staying around, because it's going to be a challenge for a lot of manufacturers. But we do appreciate all of you for, of course, joining us today, to our two chairmen for joining us today, and for obviously helping lead the charge, and for Fergal to playing the role of my counterpart over in Europe and leading the charge of the editorial team. If you don't get the European newsletter, sign up for it. If you don't get the U.S. newsletter,
SVGEurope.org.
SVGEurope.org, yep. And obviously the U.S. one, if you're a European, sign up for that one. So thanks, everybody. Closing comments, anything? Mike? See you tomorrow?
Yeah, go out and see some exhibits. We asked the exhibitors to step up this year, and it's got some real interesting stuff out there. So spend a little time.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.